discussion a little bit, if that's okay. We've always talked about how a person can be an advocate from Israel from wherever they are on the political spectrum. And in fact, part of what makes, that is part of advocacy of Israel, is explaining to people that Israel is a democracy where people have broad opinions and those are respected and decisions are made through elections and however the government functions. But I guess because you write this point-counterpoint column, do you have advice, and I noticed Marcy used the word ludicrous when describing a political opinion you disagree with. Do you have advice on, because these are passionate issues, how to disagree in a productive way for...
Don't say ludicrous. Disagree with each other or disagree with...
How can you, your friends, you disagree pretty seriously, how do you maintain friendships and how do you maintain Jewish unity and a sense of working together when you disagree that vehemently?
Can I say something? It actually, I'll answer the question, but I prefer to answer it indirectly first. I mentioned that I was the regional director of the Anti-Defamation League in Cleveland, and one of the things that I did was advocate on behalf of Israel. Now, there were different Israeli governments in power at the time, some of which I agreed with more than others. But the one thing that I absolutely learned very quickly is that if you express your views in an extreme way, you turn off, if you're dealing with a general American audience, if you're dealing with the non-Jewish public in the United States, if you want to write a letter to the editor of the Plain Dealer, or if you, in a year or two, are on a college campus, either as an editor or as a reader of a campus newspaper, if you are very extreme in your views in support of a hard line on Israel's security or Israel's right to certain territory, you are absolutely going to turn off your readership, and you're not going to be an effective advocate. It's really that simple. The real dilemma, and Marcy and I have discussed this, is what's the role of the American Jewish community as advocates for Israel? Because generally, pretty much the accepted approach has been that the role of the American Jewish community is to support the legitimately elected government of the day in Israel. But that's not so simple, because does that mean that this year, when Netanyahu's Likud is in power, that I say things differently than I did last year when Ehud Olmert's Kadima party, which is more centrist, was in power? Does that affect my own credibility? I mean, how is it that last year, if I would have been ADL regional director, I would have written a letter to the editor in the Plain Dealer that would have been more to the left than this year I would have when Netanyahu was in power? I'm really not sure what the answer is. Now, there's some things that clearly are consensus. Clearly, Israel's right to exist is a consensus issue, and that is something that you can defend without any hesitation. Clearly, condemnation of Palestinian and Arab violence and terrorism is something that you can absolutely say. But then there are nuances. What do you do about the settlement policy? For example, when Marcy and I, who are both Israeli citizens, don't agree among ourselves on what it should be. And I would say, for all of the reasons that I could purport that Gush Etzion, that there are reasons that there are settlements in Gush Etzion. I mean, I can make the argument, but I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it because I don't think it's in Israel's interest. I know that one of the arguments in terms of Gush Etzion, and I don't know whether you were talked to about the history of Gush Etzion, was that Gush Etzion was a place that Jews were run out of in 1948. That there were Jewish communities that during the War of Independence, Jews were massacred and were run out of. The reason that I don't agree with that argument is that there were areas of Israel during the War of Independence that Arabs were run out of. And it becomes a really slippery slope if you say that Gush Etzion has a right to exist. Then what do you do with Jaffa, and what do you do with Ramla and Lod, two Arab communities, formerly Arab communities near Ben Gurion Airport? It took me a while after my first visit to Israel, and after I was reading about Israeli history, when a bus that I was on went through Lod, and I realized it looks just like East Jerusalem. Why does it look just like East Jerusalem? It looks just like East Jerusalem because it was an Arab Arab community until 1948. So I think it's a really slippery slope to try to say the Jews have the right to live in any area, to come back to any area that they've been run out of. But my final point, and this is the most important thing, to be an effective advocate for Israel, however you decide that has to be formulated, means knowing your facts. Because, I mean, I can tell you I have a friend who's in graduate school this year in London, and who said that the atmosphere on campus at his school, and I think at European colleges in general, is so much worse in terms of Israel than in the United States. But he said that he was going to school with a lot of Jewish students who during the war in Gaza really wanted to be advocates for Israel, but had absolutely no idea what the facts were. They had a gut feeling that as Jews that they should come to Israel's defense on campus, but they had absolutely no idea how to do it. So I think if you get nothing else out of this trip here, if you came back with no other message than it's important for you to be well informed, you cannot be an effective advocate for any point of view as it relates to Israel unless you know your facts.
I want to address what Michael said, that part of the reason Cliff and I get along so well, and we, despite our differences, is that we respect each other, and we respect each other's point of views. I think sometimes he's wrong or misguided.
Always.
But I appreciate always. But I appreciate the fact that he loves this place as much as I do, and that he wants what he thinks is best for Israel. I want what I think is best for Israel. But we're both heading in that same direction. And you know, and again, we both, though we're billed as left and right, we both tend toward the center of our opinions anyway. So it's easier to disagree. But again, respect and respecting the other person's point of view is incredibly, incredibly important.
Can I ask, if you were on campus and confronted with somebody who simply didn't believe that Israel had the right to exist, who simply told you that this was land that was stolen from the Palestinians and that there was no reason why the Palestinians should have to pay the price for having their homeland taken away after the Holocaust, when the Palestinians were not responsible for the Holocaust. It was the Europeans who were responsible for the Holocaust. And by the way, if that seems extreme, I was really a little uncomfortable. I don't know whether any of you heard Barack Obama's speech in Cairo a few weeks ago, where essentially he came out in support of Israel's right to exist. Why? Because of centuries of Jewish persecution of Jews, meaning. And I was really uncomfortable with that, and I wrote a column about it in the Jewish News, because I thought it played into this very argument. I mean, if there are going to be anti-Israel advocates on campuses that you will be going to school at within the next couple of years, who say that Israel was a country that was stolen from the Palestinians and that the Palestinians are paying the price of European persecution of Jews, Barack Obama was essentially saying the same thing. He was saying it in a more pro-Israel stance. He was saying Israel has the right to exist after centuries of Jewish persecution of Jews. I don't believe that that's why Israel has the right to exist. But what do you come away with this trip thinking? Why do you think that Israel has the right to exist? And what would you say to a pro-Palestinian advocate on campus about who insists that this is a country that was stolen from its rightful owners, from the Palestinians?
Yeah. Is this person a Palestinian and a Muslim?
Not necessarily, because there are a lot, there is a large number of well-meaning, American-born, WASP,
She has an answer.
Anglo-Saxon.
I was going to say, because we talked about, you can't change some people's minds. People are just set in their ways. Like, obviously a Palestinian is going to be very pro-Palestinian because it's not going to be a way to change his mind. So it makes a difference who you're talking to. Like, my answer changed based on who I was talking to.
Okay.
Linda wants to identify her audience before she gives
Okay, I think that makes sense. But are
Which
you
is very
saying that for a Palestinian American, there's almost no common language?
It depends on how how radical they are in their ways. Because sometimes it's more worth discussing and helping the people who are just kind of on the fence and don't really know the fact, they're just following whoever has a good.
You know, I understand what you're saying. I think that you always have to tailor your message to your audience.
So let's do it this way. Can you give it in one sentence the statement you just said about the anti-Israel statement? Someone is coming.
All right.
It's a tough editor.
No, because they will do. We're gonna do ARM. We're gonna do ARM with them. ARM is one of the techniques that we are using.
Okay.
So.
Israel is an illegitimate state. It's a colonial state that it was imposed